Hi, I'm Sam Montgomery-Blinn, Senior Software Development Engineer in Test at SAS Institute. I'm going to be talking to you about abusing Robot Framework Data Driver for fun and profit. Profit definitely not guaranteed. Fun, we'll see. First, let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I don't want to take too much time. I've been doing test automation as my passion for about 23 years now, back to my senior thesis in software engineering back at Purdue University. I had 17 years at IBM, and since then I've been at SAS Institute, where we've been using Robot Framework for almost 3 years now, and I'm a huge proponent of it. And lately we've come to use even more and more of the ecosystem, including Data Driver. And this will be hopefully a good dive into Data Driver and how you can really get to use it well. So we started in Robot like anyone else with our Hello Robot. And this first example is not the simplest example. You can do really neat things with Robot Framework. You can have a series of statements, or you can write this beautiful gherkin, given, when, then. But when you're testing a REST API or trying to get null pointer exceptions and verifying the HTTP 500 error, it's kind of contrived to do it that way. So what we end up doing is a lot of JSON inputs, JSON outputs, and having certain keywords process one and verify against the other. So we started with one, robot.json, and then robot.result.json. That worked pretty well, so let's do some more. RoboCon.json, RoboCon.result.json. And we start to see a pattern, but we're not really sure. Let's keep going. Sure enough, there's a pattern here. We're just cutting and pasting, changing the file name. There's a bit of a code smell here. Even tests can have code smell, it's true. So from there, we transitioned into templates. Fantastic feature in Robot Framework. Our test cases section is replaced by one test case, JSON scenarios, and we use the template to say we're going to have this as our test template keyword, and then we just emit the strings that we want to pass to that test template keyword, and we turn that and actually run our actual test keyword. That was pretty good. It worked pretty well. There was a big downside for us, though. Templates don't give us much granularity as we're looking at the results. 1 out of 2, 0 out of 2, 2 out of 2. It's not giving us as much information as we could, and as much information as we've generated. And for us, it's even more striking if we wanted to look at the statistics by tag. We have our total, pass, fail. The new feature, 1 out of 1. Hey, we're doing great. Our new feature must be solid. Base feature, 0 out of 1. A regression must be off the charts. What are we doing? It's a disaster. But when we switch to Data Driver, we could get a different picture. Data Driver will explode each of those templated tests into a full first-class test. So we'll see the full range of 0 to 200. Hopefully we'll see more days of 199 than 0. But 199 out of 200, that's great. 1 fail, defects already open automatically. We'll go and triage that, check it out. When we drill down into statistics by tag, now the new feature, 1 out of 1, doesn't look as great. Now we see that maybe we're not writing as many new tests as we need to for this new feature. Meanwhile, our base feature, where our 0 out of 1 made it look like we were having a disaster of regression, 0% is not good for anyone. 198 out of 199, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. We feel pretty solid about this. We fix our one issue and we move on. But Data Driver also had a few drawbacks for us. One of those is that we ended up making all these CSV files that we didn't feel should exist. And I'll get to more about why we felt that way, but just inherently, there were problems with these CSV files for this case. Data Driver CSV files were great for tabular data. That's what a CSV file is for. We were kind of abusing it to begin with. If you had rows of 5, 6 columns wide, you want to do combinatorial testing, Data Driver looks great for that. CSV files work pretty good for that. For our case, we're writing line by line, and they really did look like this. My test JSON. Another test JSON. Really, one more time. Yes, we kept adding more tests like this. And pretty soon you're maintaining both the CSV of JSON files and the actual JSON files themselves. And there's two real severe downfalls there. One is if one more test.json is removed from our test artifacts, the CSV file, if it's not updated in concert with that, is now going to try to run that, fail the test, probably fail the build or promotion. That's where we're trying to get to push code to production or the next stage in the pipeline. And we don't want that to happen. But another drawback that is almost as bad for me is someone on my team could have written the best test ever.json, and then we're never going to run it until someone also puts it in the CSV file. But we can get around that many ways, and we tried a few different ways. By making the CSV files anyway, not by hand, but with a different Groovy or shell hook earlier in the pipeline, using a -V or -- variable file script to generate a CSV file right before we run robot. In the suite setup of in a particular robot file, we could call a create CSV file keyword, or there's actually another data driver feature, config keyword, where we can specify config keyword that will run as data driver is coming up. And again, that could be creating a CSV file for us from a directory or pulling it out of a database, whatever we wanted to do. But there was still something about that. Wasn't quite happy. Maybe not quite a code smell or a test smell, but why a CSV file when the data is all there? Right? The directory is the CSV file. So we kind of took a look at how do we make a virtual CSV file out of a directory? Well, it turned out data driver, and thanks to Renee being awesome, already had all the features we needed. We wrote basically 3 lines of code maybe to make it all work. When we're importing data driver, instead of giving file path to my CSV, now we can give a glob pattern, whether it's a star.json, whether it's just a one star, whether it's using another kind of regex that the glob class can parse and read. The trick here is using the reader class feature. Usually you would use that to specify some really funky CSV parser that you needed to use that wasn't quite handled by all the other cases that are already implemented. And the only real trick here is that when you're doing something like this, where it's not an actual file, you need to set file search strategy to none. And what that does is it keeps data driver from crashing because it can't failing because it can't find the file, because there is no file named star.json. And as with any other data driver test, you tell the test template that you want to use that has to be implemented in the robot file. And that's the only keyword that you have to implement in the robot file. That is the only keyword. We almost always call out to another library right within that template. Your test cases section has to have that, kind of null, no-op test case, that data driver, when it's running, it kicks that out and it injects all of the test cases it discovers from the CSV file. And I always call mine basically data driver test, no file. So if I see that in the log, I know that something terrible has happened and my data driver initialization has failed spectacularly. And our keyword is just our JSON test template. Arguments, we've kind of settled on this file name as the argument. We could pick other things, have multiple arguments, tags, but for this example, let's just stick with this. What's really happening here is the reader class is the CSV file. The one we've talking about today is class glob data reader. It inherits from abstract reader class, one of the many helpful helper and abstract interfaces that Renee has provided in data driver. It's init with a reader config. That reader config is just all the key value pairs that are passed to data driver when it is being imported into a robot test suite. Get data from source is the meat and potatoes of the abstract reader class. That's what basically makes it abstract. If you want to not be abstract, you actually have to do something. In our case, we're going to call another method, read glob to data table, and you return the self to data table at the end of that. We didn't even have to have this in a separate method. I kind of like to keep it a separate method so I could test it separately. So here it is. def read glob to data table is basically using an already built-in method, analyze header, from the abstract reader class. That's just putting the first row of our virtual CSV file together, test cases, file name. And then we use our glob pattern to loop through, pick the name of the test to be just the part of the path without all the directories and without the .json at the end. And that's the name of our test. And then we call another already existing helper method, read data from table, to inject a row into our virtual CSV. And that's it. That's the talk. No, there's a little more. What if you didn't want to use directory? What if you wanted to kind of punt even further up or back or down, however you want to look at it, your source of truth for what tests to run to TESTRAILS? Well, you can. You can actually write, if you wanted to. Maybe not a good idea, but Robot Framework will let you do it, and DataDriver will help. Instead of having your JSON files in a Git repository, for example, you could have them as attachments in a TESTRAILS, test suites, test cases. And you can use all the REST APIs that you like to go and pull those down and execute them if you'd like. Without TESTRAILS, you could do Jira. You could be pulling CSV or JSON out of a database. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you can have a source of truth somewhere that doesn't have to be a CSV file. It could be a directory. It could be TESTRAILS. It could be a database. In summary, don't cut and paste. Don't settle for low granularity on reports. Don't create and maintain CSV files that shouldn't exist. Use Robot Framework. Use Robot Framework DataDriver. And please vote for my pull request, which would put glob data reader into DataDriver. So thank you very much. I look forward to your questions, and thanks for your time and attention.
Hey, Samuel, welcome to RoboCon.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So actually, Renee had a reply to you, and his reply was, let me bring it up in Slido. Nice idea. We'll include this soon. Just in addition, if others have good ideas of cool data readers, you are welcome to tell them or code together tomorrow at the sprint. So if you haven't know about the sprints, you could join them tomorrow, hands-on, to get some awesome hands-on work there. All right, Samuel, someone asked, are there any requirements to use the data driver that they need to be aware of?
Not really. If you pip install Robot Framework-DataDriver, you get it and everything it needs. I think it will pull down a CSV Python package as well. And then, of course, you need whatever Python classes that you're using if you're wanting to hijack the CSV portion of it. If you need, a REST, you have to get requests and things like that. But it's pretty light.
Someone also asked how many tests you have actually using data driver.
So it's interesting. If you looked at it as the templates way, there's basically 6 large scale test scenarios, but within that there's 30 to 40 of each, so you end up with about 180, 200 of actual tests doing this. And these are pretty heavy lifting with our JSON APIs, which are a big portion of our product.
So are there any gotchas with that? Like, can you run them in parallel? Are there any things people need to be aware of when they are using the data driver in one of their tests to just watch out for?
I'd have to punt to Renee about there's implications of using data driver and the PA bot test level split. Mm-hmm. We haven't played with that too much because we're already running enough things in parallel with PA bot that they can be running. We run each of those suites sequentially instead of trying to parallelize inside that. But that's definitely something to look into. There's no gotchas as far as running it at the suite level split, like the default PA bot behavior. We can run many as you want at the same time.
Awesome, Samuel. Because this was such a short session, we only have a short Q&A. Those are all the questions we have time for. But any parting words of wisdom you want to leave RoboCon?
Not at all. Just, this is a great community, and to look forward to seeing anybody in the sprints tomorrow who wants to hack around. I'll hopefully be around as much as I can.
Awesome. Thanks again for contributing. Appreciate you. Talk to you later. Cheers.
Thanks, Joe.